Hello, Dr. Sanchez and classmates. My name is Laura Coleman, and today I'm going to be completing the last assignment for leadership and team development by presenting my graduate project. Today I will be discussing how situational leadership affects decision-making positively and negatively during a workplace culture change due to massive layoffs. The follower's instant and long-term reaction to these changes is dependent upon how the leader makes decisions. So a little bit of the overview today. We're going to go over my introduction, which I just went through, the literature review, so all the studies that I broke down, my methodology for the research that I did, and then the limitations of all the studies that I looked at. And then I'm going to go through some suggestions, my conclusion, and then recommendations at the end. So, situational leadership affects decision-making positively and negatively during a workplace culture change due to massive layoffs. That's my hypothesis through this research that I did. So keep that in the back of your mind as we work through all of these different studies that I go through. So the first literature review was by Ann Holton and Sten Olaf. It was titled Leadership Style and the Process of Organizational Change. And it was looking at just an individual in this study and shows that change can influence time pressure, well-being, job satisfaction, and stress. The second study is Situational Impacts on Leader Decision-Making by Cheryl Denmark and Michael Mumford from the Leadership Quarterly. And then the third study is How to Master Situational Leadership by Fred Schmalz from the Government Executive. We'll work through those as we go. So the methodology that I chose is exploratory, based solely on the fact that there needs to be more research done on this problem that has not been clearly defined in today's society. So this student needs to determine the best design and recommendations to draw a conclusion. So the first study, Leadership Style and the Process of Organizational Change. Organizational change can influence, time pressure of jobs, well-being, so just everything involved in life like financial well-being, stress, health, all of that. Job satisfaction, so whether someone enjoys coming to work each day, and then stress as well. Organization change is associated with negative outcomes for companies and for the employees. That's in Holton's research, basically just showing that when companies go through such a big cultural shift, that there's going to be some negative outcomes with that. So leadership style. Picking the type of leadership style for this research was not too hard for me. I picked situational leadership, mainly just because it's a flexible style, and sometimes you can combine that with other styles into your situation. A study I looked at by Gail Moat really showed that in her study that anyone can do any type of leadership as long as they can adhere to what people need. So that's important in situational leadership. And then one of the studies by Denmark showing that situational leadership can have an impact on decisions, which in a situation of massive layoffs like we're discussing, that's a big factor. And then pressure increases in higher performing roles, which could lead to poor decision making. That was also by Denmark. So how do followers deal with change? Followers react to change based on their managers and how they react to it. So oftentimes managers don't realize that they're influencing their followers. So that's something they should really take note of, that they're helping to facilitate the organization shift by being informative, competent, calm, and positive with their followers. A lot of times that gets forgotten, so it's something to take note of. Every follower will have a different reaction to the change, but if the manager's responsibility to change their leadership style and to be flexible enough to encourage and motivate their followers to accept the new change. So it's their responsibility moving forward. So situational impacts on leader ethical decision making. So this was another study I looked at based solely just on how people make decisions and what influences them. So leadership ethical decision making, positive reactions toward the leader, which include being able to trust them and have job satisfaction. So I think that's crucial to any type of place of employment, to have that trust and to want to come to work and have that satisfaction of the work that you're doing. You'll get positive reactions from that. Situational occurrences have been shown to predict how decisions are made. So situations like massive layoffs show how things will happen. So just being aware of that. Leadership characteristics. So there are characteristics to avoid as a leader. So using the situational approach, if you're trying to adapt to a situation like massive layoffs, you want to avoid being unapproachable, distant from your employees, and of course rude. But when you're unapproachable, it's hard for your teammates or your followers to feel like they're engaged with you. So a lot of times that'll create job dissatisfaction and cause people to leave. Same thing with being distant. If they feel like they never see you or don't hear from you, that doesn't really make them feel comfortable at work. So some characteristics to have would be inspirational, honest, and approachable. Of course, all of these make perfect sense. We'll look at this slide on the next slide here. I found this chart. It kind of shows a great, well-rounded leader through all these characteristics. So, someone that sets an example would be a good leader, someone that leads change in a positive way, someone that shares the vision of the company and then also the employees, someone that's forward-looking. I think that's important in any type of role, to kind of always be looking ahead to see how you can be better. Someone that's competent, honest, someone that can empower people, and then someone also that can inspire people to be their best. Alright, situational variables. Performance pressure is something that a leader will most likely encounter throughout their employment. The high stress level of having to perform in a timely manner will make decisions that much harder for a leader. Depending on the situation, a leader could have a negative experience from all the pressure. So you see that picture down there, just kind of a good representation of someone that is experiencing a lot of pressure, just kind of bears down on them. So during different situations like massive layoffs, the pressure can definitely get to somebody. Interpersonal conflict is another variable to take notice of because it can impact your decisions as well. It has been related to depression, anxiety, and frustration, according to Stenmark in his study. So of course, if you can avoid any of those type of situations where someone's depressed or anxious or frustrated, you don't want your followers to feel that way, you don't want your managers to feel that way, so trying to avoid that conflict at all costs. Alright, my next study is from Fred Schmalz. He just did this year, so it's pretty recent. How to Master Situational Leadership. So he goes through two things, positive perspective and cultural adjustments. Positive perspective, sometimes when you're rising through the ranks pretty quickly at work, you don't realize, but basically you're getting put in a new strategic direction, and you must adapt to it. That's according to Schmalz. And when you're adapting, it's usually pretty quickly. It's not like gradual when it's something so instant like that. This is important to note as you change positions because your whole perspective will be different from your eyes and also your followers' eyes. So not just you that's being impacted, but your followers as well. Suddenly people may not want to communicate with you because they feel like you're above them or don't have time for them. And that's when that approachable characteristic comes into play. You want them to still feel like they can come to you with their problems. So that's the time to make them feel comfortable and that you're still there for them if they need anything. Cultural adjustments is his other thing that he goes through in his study. When you're promoted, you'll often have to adjust to your new expectations as a leader or employee. The culture will be different, of course, because you're moving up to a different position that you've never had before. You'll need to figure out the best way to adapt to it. For instance, with massive layoffs, a bunch of people get promoted, which this forces people to take on more responsibilities and often putting them into situations that were new and uncomfortable. Using the situational leadership style would help someone with that flexibility so that they would have that to fit their new position and title at work. Alright, now we'll go through the limitations of these 3 studies. The situation. So each cultural shift will be different depending upon the people and the economy, which we'll walk through those in just a second. And then there's also not enough research is one of the limitations. Not recent research for today's working environment. Let's break this down just a little bit more. People. So the population of a company will always be different depending on what industry they're working in. If you have a lot of older experienced employees, the change will possibly not affect them as much just because they've been through it before, something in their past from previous employers. But if you have younger people who have no idea how to react, then you'll have to be more involved with their day-to-day environment to help them adjust to the new changes. More hands-on with them, just checking on them each day. So you can kind of see in this picture, it's kind of dependent upon if the people that you're left with have, more education or more experience. Which one would be better? A lot of times the experience is better than someone who's just recently out of college. So that's something to think about when making decisions during situations like this. The economy. So obviously this is something that cannot be predicted. People often try, but usually fail. Or sometimes they get close. But typically there's just no way to know what's coming, dependent upon your industry. You can't predict what will be happening in the economy. Some years it'll be booming, and then other years it will just crash, kind of like that picture I have on the screen. Depending on what industry you're in, you'll face more or less hardships than other people. So every industry and company is different. For instance, oil, aviation, banks, all of these companies will potentially be faced with some issues because the economy directly relates to them. This is the limitation of these studies because it is hard to take into account the future of these types of businesses. So the suggestions that I have for this type of environment would be a couple things. The structure. There should be a concrete way to handle severe situations like a cultural change. The massive layoffs, like in this situation, happen, all the time. A lot of times there's breaks in between them, but these happen on a regular basis. So there should be some sort of guideline or recommendation to follow from the experiences of other people. So my suggestion, to start with would be a survey. So ask all of the employees or followers what they're experiencing. Maybe it's too much work, not enough time off, work-life balance. You need to know what motivates people to come to work each day, and then find out if they're getting what they need from you as an employer. Oftentimes it gets forgotten after something like this happens. Then people are just, left with way too much work, not enough time off, and feeling like no one cares or takes the time to notice that they need help. Another thing would be to ask is see if the followers need help with anything. So make them feel valued and heard. Oftentimes managers don't even speak to their followers or invite them into meetings where they could share their opinions. So just taking note of that and seeing how they're doing and what they need help with their new workload. And then thirdly, keep checking every few months on the situation. So change happens all the time. The biggest issue this student has seen after a big cultural shift is that people get forgotten. They get into a new norm and no one checks on them to see how they're doing or see if they need help with their job responsibilities. Again, this is a problem because it runs people off. So retention rates at companies will be declining. Maybe people make it through the massive layoffs, but then they get so overwhelmed, they see a better opportunity somewhere else, they're going to leave. So my suggestion is to be more involved and relatable to the employees. So my conclusion, showing kind of how this affects the 21st century workforce. There is no concrete way to handle these situations, mainly because in today's society things are always changing. Every company has different identifiers, different industries, so taking time to figure out a plan before acting is the best approach to a situation like this. This will help prevent as many errors as possible. So, for instance, I know somewhere that did layoffs recently, and they planned for probably 3 or 4 months on the best way to handle letting go 20% of their workforce. But by the time it happened, it felt like they didn't really plan it because it was so disorganized and pretty harsh the way they did it. They just kind of walked people into rooms and said, "All right, you're done," and didn't really show that they cared or that they wanted to help them move forward in their career. Secondly, situational leadership is the style that can be flexible enough to adjust to any type of cultural change. So I think that's important, knowing who you're talking to during situations like this. Know their characteristics and how they react to change is something to take note of. That's why I like situational leadership, because it's being able to change directions or methods of leading in an environment that changes weekly, especially in oil and gas. Things are changing every day, so that flexibility is crucial. Thirdly, the current workforce is constantly changing due to the economy, which I mentioned before. Losing employees due to the economy means you're losing high quality people. This also changes the workforce, because now suddenly you kept the people that have less experience because they're cheaper to employ, but that leaves you with no one to teach and pass down information. Keeping the high quality employees should be top priority. So a lot of times it comes down to budget, which is understandable, but you have to think that forward-looking type of leader needs to look forward to see, well, if I'm here in 5 years and I don't have anyone who's done this job for more than a couple years, how is that going to help me stay on top of the trends and be the best in the industry? So another thing to think about in situations like that. Recommendations based on this research that I looked at. Decision making as a leader can be affected by, a person's ethics, style of leadership, characteristics, economy, and type of company. So I'm recommending there be more research done on decision making. I think all of these companies that have experiences could probably come up with some sort of recommendation on how to deal with things like this, and I don't think that's been done yet that I could find in studies, but it would be something to look at moving forward. My second recommendation is leadership engagement needs to be more involved. So recommending that a part of situational leadership be learning how to engage with the followers, which kind of moves into my third point, team development. You want to make this a priority to have your team develop together and grow together. This is often neglected and looked over because there are better things to do with our time usually. To be honest, people have a better work experience if they know that there is someone there to help them. If they run into problems or have to call in sick, they know things will get taken care of and the workload is equal among employees. Developing your team to be productive together is a way to have better retention and job satisfaction. Using the situational leadership method to bond your team together should be a top priority. This student's current experience with being part of a team is crucial to why the student stays at this place of employment. The student feels heard, wanted, and valued as an employee. It's nice coming to work each day knowing that you're important and what you do makes a difference. Team bonding. So making time to spend together either outside of work or even just, eating lunch together at work so you can have a mental break from the workload and just kind of share frustrations about your day or offer suggestions to each other. This type of environment is invited and will create success as a department, knowing that your team has your back and will help you with your development. So thank you for listening today. I have all of my references from the 10 different studies that I looked at attached to this presentation. I enjoyed this class, Dr. Sanchez, and I hope that all of you have a great day. Thanks.